Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now it is time finally for the ultimate segment of Liberty Nation Radio. It's when we reintroduce our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com legal affairs director, and the big finish, our guardian of individual liberty, Scott David Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim.
All right, let's break right in with something that I know from having known you for a long time and being a lover of liberty, you find absolutely deplorable, which is executions. And especially,
Yes,
I
sir.
would surmise at the federal level, there hadn't been any for 17 years. This week, there were 2.
Supreme Court responded to petitions to exercise several federal death row prisoners. There are 2 that have been executed already, more to come. And the manner of the executions, at least and especially one of them, which was of a man who is alleged to have dementia and Alzheimer's to the point where he cannot understand the charges against him or his own impending death at the hands of the state, are quite troubling.
So here's a key question. Did the man who was executed, did he have dementia at the time he committed the crime?
I don't believe there's any allegation that he had dementia at the time of the crime, but part of our system requires that we not execute people who can't understand for any reason, whether, in other words, that could be for, they lack the cognitive ability to do so, or through injury or medical injury, like we could say here, lack the ability to because then it's just cruel, right? Then you're just, in other words, there's no point to it. It's a political decision to execute these people. The Justice Department pushed so hard to do so. We got 2 Supreme Court decisions that were released at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Considering, you think about the level of push that takes, Tim. I just think it's a political decision on behalf of the Trump administration to do this, and I can only presume that they see political value in it, which is why we're confronting it now rather than some other time during the administration.
All right, let's move on to the ever ugly l'affaire Jeffrey Epstein and a woman named Ghislaine Maxwell. Why does she keep showing up in the headlines these days, Scott?
I was surprised on the law that she didn't get bail, but not surprised because of the cultural relevance of her, the accusations against her. To be the judge that sets this person free who Americans have been conditioned to believe is a monster for at least the better part of a year, including a Netflix series devoted to that, would be somewhat extraordinary, and that's not the result that we saw. She was denied bail, and I wrote for LibertyNation.com that the judge made clear that her wealth was part of the reason why, if not one of the main reasons why. And I just thought it was interesting. We're taught that the rich get better justice in this country, but in this case, the wealth hurt her.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next story, which is about Robert Kraft, who certainly is a rich guy, owner of the New England Patriots, multiple Super Bowl champions, in his trophy case, and an easy target because he's a Trump supporter. And, I mean, he is being, what
Tim, if
appears
you're
to
worth
be
$7
being
billion
railroaded.
and you're friends with the president and you're a white guy and you can't get your way on a misdemeanor charge, then all these notions that the system is geared towards the embodiment and building up of white males seems to put the lie to that.
I mean, talk about a trophy case. So the Robert Kraft appeal has been heard, and let's make clear again, we've discussed it before, not because Robert Kraft himself is a significant guy, but because it's emblematic of the political prosecutions of people and the temptation by district attorneys to go get themselves one for the trophy case. And the bigger, the better, even if you have to make up that he was part of a sex ring when all he did was pay for sex.
Or add another chapter to that, which is now you don't want to be embarrassed because of the quality of the arrest and prosecution. So
Right.
Dave Arenberg, who is the Democrat politician who prosecutes the case, he's the state's attorney for that area. It's incumbent upon him then to secure some kind of conviction so that he can walk away without being embarrassed and affecting negatively his future political aspirations.
Face saving. And it may be that the so-called sex ring that they were going at, it may be A lot of times it seems to me, Scott, that they get a high-profile guy and try to bag him to cover for a web of incompetence that occurred throughout an investigation, and they try to cover it with a big name.
Ehrenberg said modern-day slavery can happen anywhere, including Jupiter, Florida. So he was alleging that there was modern-day slavery happening, and then when it came time to actually, that was before the press and the cameras, right? But when it came time to actually produce charges in court, which could be substantiated, it turned out to be simply misdemeanor prostitution charges. And that's why I say and speculate, Tim, that if instead of being a rich celebrity, Mr. Kraft was just a poor workaday fellow, these charges would have already been dropped.
So let's see if we can interpret this. You're saying he was a victim of bias against the rich.
That's right.
Okay. I wanted to hear you say it or agree with it or say yes.
There may be one other component there, which is just biased in favor of a positive political outcome for the Florida state attorney.
Okay. That's probably a better way to put it. Okay. Fair enough. Now, Michael Flynn. We have to go back to that one, too. The Judge Sullivan appeals the order that he dismisses the charges.
Tim, the federal government said they didn't want to prosecute Judge Flynn anymore. Judge Sullivan said, well, not so fast. I might not be ready to dismiss these charges. Flynn's counsel went to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and said, please direct this district court judge to dismiss these charges. We're entitled by right to have them be dismissed. Flynn lost that case. Basically, they asked him for a briefing on it, and he lost. That was a 3-judge panel at the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Now is directed by that court to dismiss these charges. He doesn't want to do that, at least not yet, and he appeals not to the Supreme Court, which he could, but to the full D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And there are 11 judges on that circuit, and so 50% plus 1 would mean 6 of them would have to vote to take this case. After that review process, the result could then be appealed to the Supreme Court as well.
So now he's going to go about twisting the arms of multiple appellate court judges because he hates Trump that much and takes this extraordinary step. Isn't it extraordinary, or is it just unusual? I
think that we're now into extraordinary territory.
Right.
And also, don't underestimate the possibility that this has nothing to do with Donald Trump and just is about one man who's perceived as being pushed around and doesn't want to be. In other words,
I just assume everything between now and November 3rd,
right,
everything
sure,
is about the election. Before we go, speaking of the election, this dust-up between a MAGA-hatted woman in a viral video and Joy Reid of MSNBC with the ironically named morning show Morning Joy, which spreads no joy, but we digress, Scott.
Well, speaking of ironic names, the name of the woman in the suit is La Liberté. That's her last name. And Ms. La Liberté, Roslyn, was at a community meeting on immigration when she had an exchange with a Hispanic man at the same meeting, a Hispanic boy, and a photo was taken. And just like the remember the Covington Catholic photo that spread a lie around the world? Well, this similarly spread a lie, and the lie was that Ms. La Liberté was chiding the young Hispanic man and saying vile things about him. And in fact, the opposite was true. They were having a civil discussion about the issues at hand. And Ms. Reid tweeted out that photo and added some spice to it in terms of accusations against Ms. La Liberté and Ms. Reid was never there, and she just kind of passed along this information. So what happened was Liberté sued for defamation, and the lower courts threw out the case and said that she was basically a public figure for that limited purpose, and also that the California SLAPP statute would be in place, which allows for easy dismissal of lawsuits against public figures. With the idea,
are they considered like nuisance lawsuits?
Strategic lawsuit against public policy is what that SLAPP acronym stands for, and it's designed to prevent lawsuits that are merely put up not in a genuine attempt to redress a wrong, but to frustrate a discussion of public policy.
On that note, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.